mining group Sibanye-Stillwater plans to institute disciplinary proceedings against hundreds of mine workers. Over 200 of them staged a 3-day underground sit-in at the Kroondal mine in Rustenburg over unpaid benefits. Let's get you some analysis on the story. Joining us is a senior researcher at the Benchmarks Foundation, David van Beek. Always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks very much for your time. I suppose, David, you know, it goes to show just what mine workers are going through. Something like an underground sitting is quite an extreme form of protest. It comes with, I'm sure, a whole range of dangers, as the mining industry does. But it goes to show just how desperate mine workers are. Would you agree with that?
Well, yes. I think that the desperation also is caused by the fact that the personnel management people at Sibanye really shot themselves in the foot, because when Sibanye took 50% shareholding in this quasi mine from Anglo American, with the idea of taking the whole mine eventually by the end of this year, it was agreed that within 90 days of that acquisition of 50%, there would be an employee share ownership scheme implemented, similar as to the other operations of Sibanye at Rustenburg and at Marikana. And so they pay dividends twice a year to ordinary shareholders, and they paid on the 1st of June. And they paid the workers in Rustenburg and they paid the workers in Marikana, but they didn't pay the workers in Kwezi mine. Now, you know, for them to institute disciplinary procedures against these workers really is problematic. They should rather implement disciplinary processes against their personnel people, their human resource management people, because the ESOP is not in place like it should have been in place. And the second thing is that they should rather have withheld the payment to all the workers until the ESOP was in place and then pay everyone at the same time. The problem these days is that workers speak to one another across mines. They've got cell phones and all kinds of technology these days. You know, you can't do something on one mine and not do it on another mine and expect people not to know about it.
So the argument that Sibanye is using to institute this disciplinary action, David, is it incorrect then to say that some workers don't actually qualify for the share scheme, or is it just a failure of SOP, as you say?
Well, I think that, it's a failure of them to implement the agreements that they made when they acquired this particular mine. I don't think that there is something like people don't qualify. You know, if you've got an employee share ownership scheme, all employees should benefit from that scheme, and not just some employees. Employee share ownership schemes are a good thing, but, you know, you have to apply it evenly throughout your workforce. Otherwise, you create divisions within your workforce, which can lead to conflict between unions. It can lead to conflict between workers, but it can also lead to conflict between management and its employees. You know, you created a recipe for instability if you do these things haphazardly and you don't think through what you are doing.
So the next step for Sibanye, at least according to your analysis, David, should not be disciplinary action.
Well, my analysis is that they should speak to the unions and they should rectify this particular situation. They should indicate why they didn't finalize the agreement around employee share ownership, that they agreed to when they actually made the acquisition of Kwezi mine from Anglo. The workers can't be held responsible for, the tardiness of management in honoring agreements.
David, can we take a step back and just get an explanation from you on how the employee share option scheme works and how it should work?
Well, I think that, employee share ownership schemes is an agreement between the trade unions and the mining company as to participation by the workers in the benefits of the mine. It's part of their social and labor plans. And in this particular case, if I listen to the representatives of the two unions, that is AMCU and NUM, they are both in agreement that, when Sibanye acquired its share in the Kwezi mine, it agreed that it would, within 90 days, conclude the employee share ownership scheme, which it has not done within the time frame indicated. and then Sibanye pays out twice a year, and when it paid out now, and some workers didn't get the benefit, obviously questions were asked about. We were told that when Sibanye takes over this mine, this is going to happen. But there are lots of problems as far as I'm concerned with Sibanye at the moment. They are paying out a dividend against the backdrop of announcing a 2 billion rand loss in March.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where the money comes from for paying out dividends, given the fact that the company doesn't seem to be doing all that well, and the fact that platinum is not doing all that well. We also know that they closed some shafts at Marikana and retrenched a couple of thousand workers there, and they are also in the process of closing down Beatrix mine in Welkom, which is also part platinum, part gold mine. So it's a clear indication that there are problems for Sibanye. It keeps on buying marginal mines and then not managing those mines. It abandons them. It abandoned the Cook 1 and 2 shafts, for example. In Marikana, it recently closed some shafts as well. At some point, Sibanye is going to run into trouble because platinum itself is not a commodity which is very marketable these days, given the change over from combustion engines to electric engines. By 2035, the whole of Europe will no longer have any petrol-driven engines, and therefore there will be no demand for platinum. 90% of platinum is used in catalyzers for combustion engines, and if the combustion engine goes out into the bin of history, then mining companies that are mining platinum are going to be in trouble. And so if I was in charge of Sibanye, I wouldn't be acquiring more and more platinum mines.
Yeah.
If you look at the recent attempt by BHP Billiton to acquire Anglo, BHP Billiton said they don't want the platinum. We can buy Anglo minus the platinum and the diamonds. And so I don't know what motivates Sibanye to have this aggressive acquisition policy of mines that really are going to be redundant in the near future.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, David, whether it's an issue of whether Sibanye can afford to pay this employee share scheme, but you were saying at the same time that they're paying out dividends at the moment.
Yeah, so I'm surprised that they're paying dividends at all, given the situation that they've made a 2 billion rand loss so far this year, and I don't think they can afford. They're working themselves into the same type of crisis that Lonmin was in 2012. Lonmin's mines were not profitable in 2012. It could not afford the 12,500, but it got forced into that situation because the unions had managed to negotiate similar arrangements with Anglo and other companies, Impala Platinum and so on. And so Lonmin was in a corner. They had to pay it out, even though they couldn't afford it. And that's why Lonmin basically went belly up and had to sell to Sibanye in 2018.
I suppose also an important question to ask, David, is, with the decline for platinum globally, workers on the platinum belt do face a precarious future. Is that a fair statement?
Well, I think that's a very, very important and fair statement to make. I think that the whole of Rustenburg faces the whole Bojanala district faces a precarious future because, there's lots of spin-offs. The workers who work on those mines very often live in backroom dwellings and so on, and they buy from father shops, and the local economy is driven by the wages of these mine workers. And so we are going to have a real problem because we are not really planning for the Bojanala district to go beyond mining. And we had all the opportunities in the world when platinum was booming until 2009. But since 2009, platinum has been in decline. And we always want to start planning when things are, beyond repair. And this is for me the biggest fear in this country, that we have a minister of mining that keeps on saying more and more mining when we see mining in decline everywhere. Large-scale industrial mining is in rapid decline in this country, and we have to admit it, and we have to begin to plan for a post-mining future. And no one is talking about that. We just had an election, and it wasn't even on the agenda of any of the political parties to say, what are we going to do in this country when we deplete the minerals that we have?
Yeah, absolutely. Message well received. David van Wyk, thanks very much indeed for that important analysis. David is a senior researcher at the Benchmarks Foundation.